Continuing Coriolanus from Plutarch's Lives, translated by John Dryden, revised by Arthur Hugh Clough. While this design was forming, there were great troubles and commotions at Rome, from the animosity of the senators against the people, heightened just now by the late condemnation of Marcius. Besides that, their soothsayers and priests, and even private persons, reported signs and prodigies not to be neglected, one of which is stated to have occurred as follows. Titus Latinus, a man of ordinary condition, but of a quiet and virtuous character, free from all superstitious fancies, and yet more from vanity and exaggeration, had an apparition in his sleep, as if Jupiter came and bade him tell the Senate that it was with a bad and unacceptable dancer that they had headed his procession. Having beheld the vision, he said he did not much attend to it at the first appearance, but after he had seen and slighted it a second and third time, he had lost a hopeful son, and was himself struck with palsy. Palsy's like some sort of sore or something, isn't it? Oh, palsy. Okay. I'm thinking the Ring of the Rosies song. So it's important to note that we humans, we can invent rituals, but this is per se voluntary compared to what the spiritual realm wants us or calls us directly to do. And our voluntary things can be just fine. They can be upon the same principles and stuff. They're just not the same. He was brought into the Senate on a litter to tell this, and the story goes that he had no sooner delivered his message there, but he at once felt his strength return and got upon his legs and went home alone, without need of any support. The senators, in wonder and surprise, made a diligent search into the matter. That which his dream alluded to was this: some citizen had, for some heinous offense, given up a servant of his to the rest of his fellows, with charge to whip him first through the market, and then to kill him. And while they were executing this command and scourging the wretch, who screwed and turned himself into all manner of shapes and unseemly motions, through the pain he was in, the solemn procession in honor of Jupiter chanced to follow at their heels. Now, if you're going to execute somebody, torturing them first is probably wrong, right? Several of the attendants on which were, indeed, scandalized at the sight, yet no one of them interfered or acted further in the matter than merely to utter some common reproaches and execrations on a master who inflicted so cruel a punishment. For the Romans treated their slaves with great humanity in these times, when working and laboring themselves and living together among them, they naturally were more gentle and familiar with them. It was one of the severest punishments for a slave who had committed a fault to have to take the piece of wood which supports the pole of a wagon and carry it about through the neighborhood. A slave who had once undergone the shame of this, and had been thus seen by the household and the neighbors, had no longer any trust or credit among them, and had the name of a furcifer, furca being the Latin word for a prop or a support. Okay, so furcifer, okay. So the person who brings the prop. When therefore Latinus had related his dream, and the senators were considering who this disagreeable and ungainly dancer could be, some of the company, having been struck with the strangeness of the punishment, called to mind and mention the miserable slave who had lashed through the streets and afterwards put to death. The priests, when consulted, confirmed the conjecture. The master was punished, and the orders given for a new celebration of the procession and the spectacles in honor of the god. Well, the entity that they considered God now. It's up to you what your personal beliefs are regarding Numa. In other respects, also a wise arranger of religious offices would seem to have been especially judicious in his direction, with a view to attentiveness of the people, that when the magistrates or priests performed any divine worship, a herald should go before and proclaim, with a loud voice, Hoc age. Do this you are about, and so warn them to mind whatever sacred action they were engaged in, and not suffer any business or worldly avocation to disturb and interrupt it. Most of the things which men do of this kind being in manner forced upon them, and affected by constraint, it is unusual with the Romans to recommence their sacrifice and processions and spectacles, not only upon such a cause as this, but for any slighter reason. If but one of the horses which drew the chariots, called tensa, upon which the images of who they considered to be gods and goddesses were placed, happened to fail or falter, or if the driver took hold of the reins with his left hand, they would decree that the whole operation should commence anew, and, in later ages, one and the same sacrifice was performed 30 times over because of the occurrence of some defect or mistake or accident in the service. Such was the Roman reverence and caution in religious matters. Now, there's a middle ground that we can look at, right? But there is, there's this certain side to making something completely spiritual. But that doesn't mean you have to repeat and repeat and repeat. Maybe do an extra supplication at the end as if you made a mistake or something. But, Marcius and Tullus were now secretly discoursing of their project with the chief men of Antium, advising them to invade the Romans while they were at variance among themselves. When shame appeared to hinder them from embracing the motion, as they had sworn to a truce and cessation of arms for the space of 2 years, the Romans themselves soon furnished them with the pretence, by making proclamations, out of some jealousy or slanderous report, in the midst of the spectacles, that all the Volscians who had come to see them should depart the city before sunset. Some affirm that this was a contrivance of Marcius, who sent a man privately to the consuls, falsely to accuse the Volscians of intending to fall upon the Romans during the games, and to set the city on fire. This public affront roused and inflamed their hostility to the Romans, and Tullus, perceiving it, made his advantage of it, aggravating the fact, and working on their indignation, till he persuaded them at last to dispatch ambassadors to Rome, requiring the Romans to restore that part of their country, and those towns which they had taken from the Volscians in the late war. When the Romans heard the message, they indignantly replied that the Volscians were the first that took arms, but the Romans would be the last to lay them down. The answer being thus brought back, Tullus called a general assembly of the Volscians, and the vote passing for a war, he then proposed that they should call in Marcius, laying aside the remembrance of the former grudges, and assuring themselves that the services they should now receive from him as a friend and associate would abundantly outweigh any harm or damage he had done them when he was their enemy. Marcius was accordingly summoned, and having made his entrance and spoken to the people, won their good opinion of his capacity, his skill, counsel, and boldness, not less by his present words than by his past actions. They joined him in commission with Tullus to have full power as the general of their forces in all that related to the war, and he fearing lest the time that would be requisite to bring all the Volscians together in full preparation might be so long as to lose him the opportunity of action, left order with the chief persons and magistrates of the city to provide other things, while he himself prevailing upon the most forward to assemble and march out with him as volunteers without staying to be enrolled, made a sudden inroad to the Roman confines when nobody expected him, and possessed himself of so much booty that the Volscians found that he had more than they could either carry away or use in the camp. The abundance of provisions which he had gained, and the waste and havoc of the country which he made, were however of themselves, and in his account, the smallest results of that invasion. The great mischief he intended, and his special object in all, was to increase at Rome the suspicions entertained of the patricians, and to make them upon worse terms with the people. Now, going a little back, something I might have otherwise said is the simple fact of the criminal punishments. If they're exacting and they make sense and they're witnessed and that sort of thing, then they have their effect. The death penalty works. Putting people on death row for 20 years, and that doesn't quite so much work. The prison system, once in my country, I've seen information that seems to indicate that after 5 or 6 years of a sentence, it doesn't make a difference, the effect on the crime rate, what you're actually putting. And the abuses on the prisoners and stuff, that makes its way out. People with that would never intentionally hurt anybody, or that never did any person-to-person crime, make their way out, even killing people, kill people on the inside, because of the punishment wasn't kept controlled. It was left to the guards and the prisoners per se. Well, not punishment. They're we can get away with more crimes because of the situation. That's basically the thing. But that's 5 minutes ago would have been better to say this, but with this view, while spoiling all the fields and destroying the property of other men, they took special care to preserve their farms and lands untouched, and would not allow his soldiers to ravage there or seize upon anything which belonged to them. From hence their invectives and quarrels against one another broke out afresh, and rose to a greater height than ever before, the senators reproaching those of the commonalty with their late injustice to Marcius, while the plebeians, on their side, did not hesitate to accuse them of having, out of spite and revenge, solicited him to this enterprise, and thus, when the others were involved in the miseries of war, by their means they sat like unconcerned spectators, as being furnished with a guardian and protector, abroad of their wealth and fortunes, in the very person of the public enemy. After this incursion and exploit, which was of great advantage to the Volscians, as they learned by it to grow more hardy and to contemn their enemy, Marcius drew them off and returned in safety. But when the whole strength of the Volscians was brought together in the field with great expedition and alacrity, it appeared so considerable a body that they agreed to leave part in garrison for the security of their towns, and with the other part to march against the Romans. Marcius now desired Tullus to choose which of the two charges would be most agreeable to him. Tullus answered that since he knew Marcius to be equally valiant with himself, and far more fortunate, he would have him take the command of those that were going out to the war, while he made it his care to defend their cities at home, and provide all conveniences for the army abroad. Marcius, thus reinforced and much stronger than before, moved first towards the city called Hircaum, a Roman colony. He received its surrender, and did the inhabitants no injury. Passing thence, he entered and laid waste to the country of the Latins, where he expected the Romans would meet him, as the Latins were confederates and allies, and had often sent to demand succors from them. The people, however, on their part, showing little inclination for the service, and the consuls themselves being unwilling to run the hazard of a battle when the time of their office was almost ready to expire, they dismissed the Latin ambassadors without any effect, so that Marcius, finding no army to oppose him, marched up to their cities, and having taken by force Toleria, Levici, or is it Levici, or Peda,